Welcome everyone to the regularly scheduled Board of Ethics meeting, July 18th, 2016. And who do we have here today, Lisa?
Ted Carlson, he did send me an email and he asked to be excused today.
Okay.
If you would. Terry Kelly,
Here.
Kathleen King, David Nesbitt,
Here.
Becky Wint.
Here.
Also present is Dee Ennis, Deputy Municipal Attorney, Lisa Toussaint, Administrative Hearing Officer, Lisa Slusner, Deputy Municipal Clerk. We have a quorum.
I think we should announce our
I was going to
guest.
say,
Oh.
yeah, David went.
David Pearson is also
Uh-huh.
present.
Member of the
Board of
public.
Ethics meeting.
Yes, member of the public,
Mhm.
our
All right.
audience.
Good. I do not have any proposals for changing the agenda today. Does anybody else? I propose just approving the agenda and moving on. Any objection to approving this agenda?
No.
Hearing none? Agenda's approved. Minutes for the previous meeting. Has anyone had a chance to review those? And any comments on the minutes from the previous meeting?
Let's see.
I kind of perused it. I didn't see anything, but I wasn't looking very carefully either.
Excuse me.
There are a lot of notes. Any objection to approving the minutes?
No objection.
Hearing no objections, minutes are approved. Now, let's see if we can, is that my phone?
Oh, that's me.
Okay. Consent agenda. Let's see if we can blaze through this quickly. I don't think we have too many things to review, right, Lisa?
No, we don't. The first item would be under the purple conflict of interest from ASD.
And these have all been signed by let's see, purchasing director. Okay, so these have all been approved by purchasing.
By the school purchasing.
Yeah.
CAW Engineering is owned exclusively by people who are married to teachers.
That's right. I know.
If
And
you
then-
move on to present economic
Yep.
interest,
That's where I'm
the
heading.
ones that are there, we don't have any new ones. The
Uh-huh.
ones that are there were the ones that Dee pulled, those exceptions that Dee pulled, because there's gonna be some discussion about, I think it was,
Oh, some of these were the employees on our boards and
Oh, yeah,
commissions.
there you go. And I don't know if you're wanting to deal with that now or not.
Oh, with Becky?
Well, at some point we could maybe hold off on these until we have that larger discussion.
Okay. All right, so we'll move those till next month then.
I'll just keep holding on to
We'll
it.
just keep them on, holding on to those. Is that all of these in here? The
I'm
present?
not sure it is. Let's see.
The meeting that we had, the over 200 or whatever, about 200, these were the ones that got pulled from that meeting.
Hmm.
And I believe they were all for that same reason.
These are all for the same.
Because there's Health and Human Services back there, and then.
Well, like Brennan,
Plan Commission.
Kyle Brennan, like the third one is So I'll tell you what, let me at some point try to go through a few of these, during our meeting here. And, maybe take a 5-minute break at some point and I'll see if we can close some of these down.
Okay.
And then the rest is just, I just update the report each
Yes.
time, stick it in there so it doesn't, it's just FYI, we don't have to.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
What's that?
the compliance reports,
Oh,
but I skipped over C. Kelly, the educational letter, did you remember about the educational letter?
Yeah, I emailed it to Steve Strong.
Oh, Steve.
Did he forward it on to anyone? I told him to. No?
does that need to be,
Haven't
does
heard
Steve,
from
because of Steve's negligence, do we need to move
Can
this
you
to
make
the
a
next
note?
meeting?
Can you make a note that it was due to Steve's negligence?
Okay.
This was.
All right.
I apologize, the book I've been writing is being submitted to the publisher
Oh.
tomorrow, and I promise I will get all of my word about this homework. It was all I could do to come today.
Yeah,
Okay,
I can
okay.
imagine.
I was
Yeah.
like halfway through the email to you this morning saying,
Yeah.
I am not coming. Better come. I didn't know if you were gonna make that.
You were like, I'm
Better
gonna
at
fast,
least
and when
come.
the baby comes,
That's
that's
right, that's right. Now I'm glad. As soon as I saw the baby, I'm like, I'm glad I came.
When it came to you remotely.
That's right. So,
How's the book?
amazing. It is going to change the way we think.
Is it?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, good.
It's done.
What
That's
book?
That's exactly
That's
it, yeah.
the main thing.
What's the book?
It's on professional ethics.
Oh.
So it kind of goes through, why we hold professionals to unique standards and obligations and the roles of codes of ethics, and I make some arguments about character training and professional education, and conflicts of interest, and the nature of that. And it all started because because of what we did. It's like these questions of what exactly is a conflict of interest and why is it problematic, and it got me thinking about that. And so that's sort of like what it all leads up to is this account of conflict of interest.
Did you reach any specific conclusions?
Well, the main thing, I guess the specific conclusions, in terms of conflict of interest is, which is familiar to you in law, is that appearances matter.
Yeah.
Right. And then you look at other fields like medicine, and they're way behind on that. They're like, of course it looks awful, but, it'll all be okay, right? It's like until my patients start dying, it's
Right.
okay, right? And it's like, no, right? And so and it's kind of funny, like, from law, I borrow arguments about sort of like why appearances matter, and from nursing, I borrow arguments about why character matters, and from engineering, I borrow, and so
Yeah.
actually, I can make this argument. It's like when you look at the different professions, they're all engaged in some best practices on how you should think about ethics, and then so like pull them all together, and then you arrive at something that's somewhat idealistic, but it's ultimately rooted in what a lot of the professions already do, to a better or worse extent, but they all do it. And so from law, you would like it. I start with the case of the Colorado prosecutor who pretended to be a public defender to talk a serial killer into surrendering himself. So the serial killer wanted to talk to a lawyer, and he's like, sure. He gets on the phone. Yeah, I'm David
I'm a
Plattner.
lawyer.
I'm a public defender, and sure, I'll help you. And talks
wow.
this guy in, and so that's how the book opens. It opens with that case, and because, and I say, because of his quick thinking and his savvy, this violent serial killer had been brought into justice, and what was his reward? He lost his law license, right?
Right.
Well,
For
I
sure.
was like, okay, and when I do that example in class, it's like, if this guy weren't a lawyer, would it have been okay for him to do that? And most of my students say, yeah. And I said, so given that he is a lawyer, is it okay? And they're like, no. And even my undergrads are like, no, I'm pretty sure that's wrong. And it's like, okay, what's the difference? The role, right? And then we kind of use that as sort of an example to think about that we hold professionals to these often significantly higher standards than people in everyday life, and why exactly is that? And the main shtick to the book then is the reason is that when you rely on a professional, you have to trust them, that you assume all sorts of vulnerability. You can't police their work in a lot of ways. You can't double check their work. You expose yourself to risk of abuse, and for that reason, that we set the standards higher to protect that vulnerability, and as a way of communicating to would-be clients and students and patients that professionals are trustworthy. And then from nursing, you kind of at this point, and I think if you look at the literature on trustworthiness, there's a strong consensus that just relying on disciplinary procedures is not enough, because basically that means people are only trustworthy to the degree in which they think they will get caught, right? But to the degree they think they won't get caught, if all you're relying on are disciplinary mechanisms, then people actually aren't, professionals wouldn't actually be all that trustworthy. And so when you look at medicine and engineering increasingly, you see all this emphasis on character training. Law used to do this, right? I mean, like character training used to be a real important part. And if you still have this leftover, right, you still have this like pro forma nowadays, you know, character assessment to get into the bar, right? You know, you have to, you know, but you know, back in the day in law, that was actually a pretty important part of your application into the bar. It was like, you know, that you had demonstrated the kind of character by which you could be relied upon, that you were dispositionally honest and had integrity and, you know, loyalty to your clients and all that kind of stuff. And so I make this argument then about professional virtues and virtue training and, you know,
Interesting.
and again, nursing, because they're really into that, they've actually got all sort of worked out systems on how they do that. So that's like part of your grade, like when you go into nursing programs, it's sort of like when you go into these like applied practical stuff, it's like, what kind of character does your conduct exhibit? And so if you start doing things that sort of exhibit dishonesty or disloyalty or, you know, lack of, you know, diligence, then that's enough to get you drummed out of the program.
Wow.
Interesting.
It's really
Yeah.
interesting.
It's more than interesting. It's groundbreaking. but most importantly, it's done. It's done.
Yeah.
Holy cow! It's just so,
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
congratulations.
well, thanks. Yeah, I'm happy that, you know, I'm happy that it's at least for now. I send it off when it gets peer reviewed. I'll get comments from them probably in 2 months or so, and then I'll have another couple months to kind of like give one last revision. And so it really won't be done until probably the new year. But at least it's done for now.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah, that's awesome. That's
So I
that's
apologize.
fun-
Yeah, I mean, there's various pieces of homework for this board that
Mhm.
have been like, I do not have the time to even think about this right now. So, but that will change tomorrow. I'm gonna submit it, and then I'm gonna go someplace and get rip-roaring drunk.
Okay.
Oh, and in fact, I'll just finish with this.
Yeah.
I had this great anecdote. So students in my classes have been reading chapters,
Oh,
sample
yeah.
chapters, right? You know, so I just did business ethics, and they read my chapter on conflict of interest, right, and everything. And so, because I've been like using them as guinea pigs, like, how does this sound? Is this like, can we apply this to cases in a useful way, and everything? And for my spring semester professional ethics class, we ended with this final case study on conflict of interest, and the case study is, a philosophy professor has written a book on professional ethics which he would like his students to purchase in class for his classes. Is that an unethical conflict of interest? And it was great. We had like a full day discussion about whether that would be a conflict or not. And
I've been a lot of my law school classes. We had to buy their horn book. I mean,
Yeah.
that happens all the time.
well, and that my students even say, even for the undergrad, my students were like, you know, one, I've got a lot of professors that do that. And you're the first one to even ask if that's like unethical. And I said, well, yeah, you know, think about it. We just laid out this theory of conflict of interest in terms of that the appearances matter. It does the appearance. Is the appearance such that a reasonable observer would come to think that you're significantly tempted to put your interests above the interest of the people that you're serving? It's not unlike our definition, right? It's a- you know, the definition for gifts, right? Would it lead a reasonable observer to sort of doubt the integrity of judgment, right, of the person you know receiving the gift? And so they were happy if I said, if I firewalled the financial stuff out, and I said, like, how about like all the, I don't see receive much royalties for this. I said, if I took all of that and put that into a fund for like the philosophy club, or I dumped it just sort of into the UA scholarship fund, and they were like, oh yeah, and they were like, that's fine. And then some of them were like, it's like, look, I don't know, like someone's going to get royalties anyway. I would rather my UAA professor get them than some author that I've never met, never heard of. And
Yeah.
so that's good. Yeah, now I feel like I can really just, you know. Yeah, we'll see, right, but if nothing else. So I apologize, between that and
Sorry.
Steve Strom failing me
Yeah.
month after month, boy, he really just, I mean, I know he's not on the board anymore, but geez.
Okay. Let's see. Did you see any? I went straight through the notice of intent. This is the public solicitations. There was one here. I will recuse myself when and if the Metropolitan Transportation. John Spring. comes before the Planning and Zoning Commission. Other than that, I didn't see anything else going on that caught my attention. Did anybody else?
So which section are you in?
I'm in the yellow section.
Yellow, okay.
And I was just skipping through the,
Oh, okay.
I kind of cruised ahead. I just sort of assumed that I'm going to keep plowing ahead until someone slows me down.
Well, David, can I
Um,
make one suggestion?
yeah.
With respect to the goldenrod, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you mind if you would forward this on to Ona Grouse?
Okay.
And I might make a suggestion to her. It's very clear that 4 or 5 of these commissions don't have any in, and so those we should be talking to the staff person and what's going on. Because it's all or nothing, almost all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
So it puts some responsibility on them.
Okay.
And then as I
And do you mind doing
recall-
that?
No, I don't.
Okay. I tried to call her actually this morning, but she wasn't answering.
And as I recall, for the first one, Dooley, right, we gave him permission, right, to do this on
Yep.
an annual basis, right?
Mhm.
He
Yeah,
was
we did.
having to come in like, dozens of times a year and after the conditions survey, like,
Mhm.
distancing, we did that.
Mm-hmm. The athletic supply.
Just with the caveat, remember, we gave him that permission with the caveat, like, if anything significant changes about his business or various, conflicts that might, then he has to disclose and go through that. But as long as everything remains the same, we just apply on an annual basis.
And David, what were you telling us about conflict or why you would not be involved with the John Spring one?
Oh, I read the potential conflict in the back. He said if I would recuse myself. That's the only thing that caught my attention.
Oh, okay. So you don't personally have a conflict with this? Oh, okay. I thought
No,
maybe you were saying something
no,
like
I was just, when you go through these, most of them say, neither I
Mhm.
nor a member of my immediate family. And then this one happened to pop up that I will recuse myself. I just want to make sure that's okay with everybody.
Mhm.
I don't know much about the Metropolitan Transportation
Yeah.
Plan, like what kind of role does the P&Z have in overseeing that, or do they just, dispense it? Like, what's the relationship between P&Z and the transportation plan? Anyone know?
Yeah, I don't know either. You're supposed to know anything related to land use. Just
I
so
don't-
you know, you're
I don't think
fine.
I've ever seen the transportation plan. I mean, I imagine that P&Z has some kind of like legislative authority over reviewing it and approving it. In which case, it doesn't seem like there'd be too much of trouble with bringing the students themselves. But it goes to the same kind of, I feel like, questions we've raised before about
Mhm.
how much of a bias there is if a plan is presented to a body by a member of that body, and then whether that impacts people's choices in approving or disapproving it. So I don't know if it would be
Well-
like John himself who would come forward with this plan and present it to P&Z for their review and approval, and or some member of his firm.
Well, and even more, he worked for the city for years and years, apparently.
Hmm.
Because Jill Ann, the person who came for about whether she could be on land use buildings, land use things, said, well, wait a minute, he's on them, and he used to work for the city.
So isn't
So-
Tyler work for the city too, who's on for land use land? I thought he worked for the city
No, I
at some
don't
point
know.
in his previous.
Oh, maybe in his previous, yeah.
Yeah, John.
So-
But
Well, do we want to pull this one just to ask the question, or?
maybe ask them more about information. And I don't see how it runs further afoul of what we have approved in the past, in terms of like I know I saw like Andre Spinelli is requesting there, and he also presents
Right.
things to P&Z because Spinell Homes does work that comes in front of them. So
Right.
I don't know how much of a distinction it is.
Yeah.
I just don't know what this looks like what his role would be, and then what the commission's role is.
Okay.
So are we pulling it? And
Yeah,
asking
whatever,
him, what's that?
Yeah, let's.
Yeah, okay. And then was there anything else?
Well, he's probably already submitted, right? The deadline is today. For his submission. Or it looks like the deadline for submission of response to
Oh,
solicitation
notice.
is today.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
So what is he's proposed to?
Are you looking at John?
Yeah, I'm trying to see what's his intent to respond to what.
Spring.
And I signed it. Oh, gee. Someone ran this up to me. It must be okay then.
Spring Planning Services, is that his business?
Yeah, I think he's a sort of in the private practice equivalent of planning, right? Doesn't he have his own firm and?
In fact, I know what happened, Ron Haddon, the head of purchasing, ran this up to me and said, Dee, who's the designated ethics officer? And I said, oh, that would be me. I probably asked him half a dozen questions, but I don't remember them at this point. But I'll tell you what, I'll ask a couple more questions and write them down, the answers.
On the form. Okay. So, if I remember, we were going to pull a few of those. What, conflict of interest? Or, no, the gifts. Let's see what we're doing. Sorry, I got distracted. What? The present economic interest. Did we want to hold off on?
That was the one where apparently I'm supposed to be looking at quite a few of these, right? The whole bunch is ones we pulled. Okay.
So I'm just wondering if we should hold off on the consent agenda until you were going to do that right now while we're just poking along.
Yeah, at
or do
some
you
point
wanna-
take a 10-minute break and look
Yeah.
at it, see if there's any
Okay.
we can call out immediately.
All right. So other than that and the one that we pulled, we can approve the consent agenda, and then we'll finish off with that later in the meeting. How's that sound?
That's fine.
Okay. Any objection to that? Hearing no objection, the consent agenda is passed, subject to those qualifications. Now, six. So for the first two, we just want to make sure. Kelly,
6A?
6B, we're going to move that to next meeting, is that right?
6B, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
How we
And
do, go ahead.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
We had a thought at one point, Terry, that might be just as, if you are, depending on your time, that you're gonna have to re-listen to this whole meeting
Yeah,
now.
right.
And whether you wanna do that, or whether we would delegate it to Lisa to
Mm.
do. And that was entirely up to you. We had
Oh,
mentioned
we
that.
talked about
Yeah.
that last time.
Right.
But now if you've really, your time has opened up a little bit,
Mhm.
then there's not an issue there.
Mhm.
So, just because, and I have another thing from Lance Wilbur that's just come up, which I think is related to that.
Mhm.
And he hasn't put in a formal request, but do you mind if I tell people what that is? In 1 week, I've got like 6 new requests. And his request, by the way, or he didn't make it, but people above him did, was his wife would like to serve on the Heritage Land Bank Commission. And that's a group that manages certain property inventory of the municipality that's sort of set aside, very active in selling and deals and that kind of stuff. And the commission gets staff reports, and the staff says, yeah, we recommend this, or we don't, or like the upcoming cell tower in Kincaid Park. So the commission is involved in all that stuff. So here's Lance, as the director of OMB, is that appropriate for his wife to be on that commission? I think our opinion that we will talk about a little bit today, but I think we'll end up saying, hey, if it's an adjudicatory board, no, you can't have a former employee, or we're gonna be very careful about spouses, household members of the administration being on those boards, because that whole business of two masters. But then we sort of left open, but we don't know if that applies to advisory opinions or advisory boards. Well, Heritage Land Bank is advisory, but they have their fingers in a lot of pies, as Becky could probably, including, for instance, the upcoming Kincaid cell tower issue that's gonna come up. So anyway, your opinion becomes more important, some of the things that we finesse out of that.
Oh, okay.
And so that it becomes more necessary timely.
Okay.
I just got this like Friday from administration, not from Lance, and tried to get a hold of him this morning to say, okay, Lance, tell me exactly what is it that you have to do with the Heritage Land Bank Commission. But they, for instance, on Friday submitted 3 different PACE items, or 3 of these items that Lance had to sign off on. So a lot of contact now. Now, when I say that the Heritage Land Bank Department here submitted PACE items. And then Lance as OMB as a reviewer. In fact, the Kincaid cell tower stuff went in on this thing. is that far enough removed because she would be part of the commission? So at any rate, your decision becomes a lot more timely at this
Okay.
point in time. One of the things I wanted to bring up is I'm getting sort of constant requests from both the elected officials and the assembly. Can my wife do this? Can I do this? You mean and then for themselves personally, you mean I can't? The head of this corporation has invited me to appear at such and such. $150 ticket, can I go? And I think you'll remember at the training that they are really put off about that why wouldn't you want our administration, our elected officials there, and would we please change the ethics code to deal with that issue? So I get a lot of that too, and I actually sort of, if we have time left over at the end of the meeting, want to just discuss that, because remember I'm rewriting an ethics code within the next 2 weeks.
That's right. I'm supposed to give an update to the assembly next time.
Mhm.
Oh, I think they're not having a meeting this time. But
Oh, so I have
got another
September?
month.
Oh, good. Yeah, but it seemed to be one of those things that we really do need to consider. I mean, here, for instance, what came in, and I know I'm a little off track here, but a request again on Friday that one of the members of the administration top-level team gets invited to go by ConocoPhillips to go to honorary celebration or something, an awards thing for former governors. Is that really an ethics problem if the tickets are worth $150? And I couldn't get to him to say I wanted to make sure there wasn't a friend issue. Do they do things together indicative of social relationship? Or no, out of the blue, ConocoPhillips says, here, dear executive in the current administration, do you and your wife want a ticket? And I guess that's something I would like to talk to you all about at some point, whether it's appropriate this very second.
okay. Do we want to? Do you want to take a first crack at it, and then Terry can review it?
The Lance Wilbur,
Yeah, my only concern is if I get it, that I may not get it done by the time we meet next. That's my
because you're going
biggest
out of
concern.
town, right?
Oh, you're
Yeah,
leaving.
yeah.
Oh, so do you
Yeah,
have time,
I mean,
Terry?
I'm
Yeah.
willing to.
Okay, all
I'm
right.
willing to give it a shot.
Okay. Well, let's do this then. Your schedule's opening up a little bit.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
Wednesday,
All right, so we'll leave
I'm just
it with-
gonna be
we'll leave it
partying in
with
the
you then.
backyard every day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Pina
and
coladas.
I'll email Steve right away to get that material back that I sent
Right.
him. So-
No, I mean if you do have time.
Yeah. No,
Okay. All right.
David, may I ask Terry a question? Remember when I put something on a thumb drive? Was that the recording that I put on the thumb drive for you? Because I couldn't send it through the email. It's too big.
Yeah, you made that thumb drive, but then I think you gave it to Steve.
Steve again with the thumb drive. Okay.
That's right. So he's just.
Steve.
Former board member.
I will put the recording. Do you have that little?
I throw him under the bus every meeting. But at least I started doing it while he was here. So
You did
he's
start
not
doing it, yeah.
surprised.
No,
He wouldn't
no.
be surprised to know.
That's right.
So do you have your little thumb drive with you today? And I can give you the recording.
Oh, you know something? I don't think so.
Okay, then how about if I put it on a CD? Will that work? Or I have a thumb drive probably.
Let me see if I've got a thumb drive. Let me
Okay.
see. That's the one I used to have on my keychain disappeared. Oh, I think I gave it to you, and then you never
Then
gave
I-
it back.
I gave
That
it
was
to
a very
Steve.
expensive
I gave
thumb
it-
drive. Between you and Steve, I don't know how we get anything done.
Okay, so
I hate to
B.
say I don't have. Them.
Okay,
You know, I
I'll-
can come in one day. Don't worry about it.
Okay, don't worry
the
about it.
CDs don't work for me.
Okay.
My Mac doesn't even take CDs anymore.
Yeah.
I'll slip back in
Okay.
one day this week and get it.
So
Thanks.
advisory opinion 2016-4 will go. That you'll handle that a draft for us.
But again, if I can note, that's taken on new importance, because this is,
Yeah.
I also have a question from the mayor about things his wife can do, and so it's
Okay.
coming up more and more.
Can it wait till next month?
Yes.
I mean, if he drafts it.
oh, definitely.
Okay.
That we really need to get it done.
Okay, all right. And then, let's see, 2016-3
And you can
confidentiality
say
was
the same
waived on
about
that
mine in a
too.
minute.
2016-3 confidentiality was waived. We received it in February. I know that Lisa's trying to put the date received because some of these have started to get kind of piled up. Where are we at with that one?
Can I ask, Deb, could you restate which one you're referring to?
2016-3, we're
And
on
that's
6A.
A, okay. Where we were at this one is, this is a well-written opinion, And we needed to, we wanted to double check with both Becky, as someone who served on the land use board, what she thought of it. And also, we were going to have, invite Julia to review it quickly.
And
And only
that's what-
because, yeah,
okay.
we really sort of, we want to make sure we're not representing her position. I mean, we don't attribute her position here, but
Okay.
but I think people felt more comfortable. Now, whether Becky has time at this meeting to read this,
Yeah, I was reading it. We had a reflection, and I think that this follows what I finished our discussion today, and I think it's a good decision.
and I think Becky was sort of how, sort of, because you have a lot of land use experience, how would you feel, and just very bluntly, if someone like
match the
Jillian, who
body.
has 20 years of land use, was sitting on one of these boards all of a sudden?
And the page
I think
order.
my concern would be,
Just make sure the font's the same.
you know, not so much the experience as her, again, her role currently being employed by the municipality. Like, I think we do have, again, someone in John Spring's position is in a very different role in my mind, in that he is no longer an employee of the municipality. He may have experience with the municipality, which is, you know, it informs his work on the commission. But often in my practice, I feel like sometimes we sit in an adversarial position vis-a-vis the municipality. The municipal staff's position is a direct conflict with a you know, a petitioner's position in front of the commission, and so, pardon me, having someone who's representing the municipality on the commission would feel like a real conflict.
Okay, see, and I think that's important, that you're someone who
Mm.
appears before those boards. How does that feel? And so we wanted that input, you know, because now she's doing employee relations, but,
And because the municipality does, I mean, as stated in the MOA, does take a position in PZ hearings, you know, especially in their adjudicatory proceedings. There is generally a staff position, and the municipality is a party and can
Exactly.
appeal, and sometimes does appeal decisions, and so it would be, it creates an awkward series of conflicts, I think.
and so I think the only other thing then we wanted to do was to run this through Julia, and I think you and I can meet with her tomorrow, Lisa, and just say, is there anything here that you think we've misrepresented about some of the information you provided?
Yeah, I really wish she were here to talk with us. I wish she were here. It would be really nice if you guys could hear what she has to say. I mean, she was quite emphatic, I thought, Dee.
Well, if you think it's important enough, we could reschedule
Yeah,
this
I
to the
think-
next meeting. I've already
I don't wanna
advised Joanne
yeah.
that the ultimate
Okay.
result is no, because all the boards she's
Right.
interested in is adjudicatory.
Well, we got there a different way than I think Julia was.
Oh, so Julia was the same position, but a different,
Yeah, and
analysis.
Julia, so
If
when
you
you
look
read
at-
this thing, Becky, there's a couple of different viewpoints that
Yeah.
are espoused in it. You know, there's this first viewpoint that basically is that, you know, unless expressly prohibited from participation, employees can participate. And then the second viewpoint is really the opposite. I mean, it's really what Julia, all these provisions that are cited in here, Julia walked Dee and I through kind of her position on this. And I think, Dee, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't she play a pretty heavy role in drafting?
Oh, she
these?
drafted most of these
And
provisions.
she was quite emphatic that, in her view, employees should not be on these boards.
Because in the code of ethics, they're defined distinctly, no overlap. And she said, well, this is adopted code, and I said, I just can't accept the fact that when the Assembly adopted the ethics code, they thought they were doing this. I think that goes too far.
There's nothing in the ethics code that says employees shall not be
Yeah.
on, but what it does
So we're
say.
defeating legislative intent here.
Well,
Exactly.
yeah, and if you look at the definitions, like an appointed public body of the muni is defined, and it
Okay.
basically says, you know, any municipal commission board, blah, 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 created by ordinance with members of the public appointed.
Mhm.
So in other words, the definition does not include employees, and then you go further and you look at what a municipal employee is defined to be. Municipal employee is any
Excluding
person
members.
employed by the muni, and excluding members of the public serving as members of an appointed public body. And then the final provision is this 1.15.03, additional provisions for members of the public appointed to a public body.
Mhm.
Members of the public body section applies to members of the public, serving as members of an appointed public body, but excluding elected officials covered under such and such provision and union employees. So she very clearly, I think, in her mind, felt that it was important for employees. I didn't really get what her thinking was, if this was just her view, or if it was a view after consultation with all kinds of other
folks.
Generally,
and-
her view is based on historical incidences. I mean,
Yeah, remind me, I apologize, I imagine we talked about this previously, but do we in practice have employees on any commissions right now?
yes.
Okay.
And some, however, there are some boards that
Well, but
require.
yeah, but I mean, with those exceptions, like I think where we have to have, I mean, is where we have
Right, right.
an ex officio member, a member that has to be a member of.
It comes up.
Okay.
So for instance, when, years ago, when I was first doing this, someone said, could a police officer serve on the animal advisory board? And I went through a very simple analysis, you know, are you involved in that at all? And do you do and write any tickets, you know? And I said, sure, they can be on it. And so then it went to the assembly, and Dennis Wheeler and Julia had a huge debate representing these two positions. If it doesn't say you can't, and so it was never resolved. And I'm not really sure that it's our position. I mean, we're not going to be the resolvers of this, but you thought it was important to hear Julia out. I thought it was important at least to give her
Yeah.
position
Right.
full, adequate mention. I don't think, I think we could easily
might be right.
jurisdictionally duck this, I mean, because right now, Joanna's requested to be on adjudicatory. Enough. But now, again, now I have a similar, mayor's wife wants to be on an advisory commission. So it's right before me, sitting on my desk, we need an answer.
I think what Julia would tell us is exactly what's sort of written in here. She kind of walked us through, she walked us through those different provisions, took us through those different places in the code, which in her view, sort of very clearly in her view, I think at one point, she was quite emphatic that in her view, it's very clear that union employees should not be on boards and that the code sort of.
On all
states.
boards or adjudicatory?
On all boards.
Adjudicatory?
On all boards.
On all boards.
On all boards.
Advisory
At all boards.
or,
No
But then you-
distinction
see, her
whatsoever.
view is that when you go through the code, it says, it's supposed, these
Right.
apply to board members, and this section applies to employees, and this section
Right.
apply, and
And
she reads
employees
that
don't
as saying the
include
reason why we do it.
appointed members of a board, and
Yeah.
appointed members of a board do not include employees. I mean, I
Very
think she
clear
was
rule for
quite
her.
clear about that, except where, of course, employees are allowed to be on it. And you're probably right, Dee, that that's probably just what she would say.
mhm.
So, I think these provisions we attempted to capture in here so that we correctly captured her view on it.
I would suggest I'm happy to wait another month and bring her back, but if you talk to her and she's like, yeah, no, then why don't we just sign it?
Maybe we can meet with her and see if
Yeah.
she's like that.
But do you think that we
Because
would
This is what I
benefit
think
from
she
it?
would say. This is what I think she would say. I think she would say, yes, you've largely correctly characterized what we discussed a couple months ago or whenever it was, Dee. But because I think she feels so emphatic
Mhm.
about the provisions very clearly, in her mind, specifying that no union employees on board, I think she would take issue with our reasoning in this opinion, because our reasoning comes down to whether or not, like Dee mentioned, we just sort of dodged the issue by saying, hey, this is an adjudicatory board. That just doesn't seem right. She would say, hey, you know what, that's.
It's no board,
It's
yeah.
no board,
Doesn't, yeah.
That's what I think she would say. I'm putting words in her mouth.
Yeah.
I guess I'd have one recommendation is, one, because I think this does need to be addressed in the rewrite of the ethics code, because this is my single most asked question from elected officials, and again, I'd love to have her come in and us
Mhm.
talk about that, because now that I have 2 more weeks after she comes in to write the ethics code.
Well, also because it sounds like we have an advisory opinion request that we're gonna have, that is for a
Well,
non-adjudicatory.
Yeah, and I didn't have time
board.
to convert it.
No, but what I mean is,
Mm,
we'll
yes.
probably have to bring her in for that, because that's
Yeah.
the second step of where we're at, right?
Right,
So it's a
anyway.
I do kind of
non-adjudicatory.
feel like Dee is getting hammered with enough of these,
Yeah.
and they're all a little bit different.
Right.
But there's some similarities that what we really need as a group
Okay.
is an overarching framework for how we analyze
Okay.
these.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
And just so you know, she had an appointment today till 12:30. So if she was going to come in, she said it'd be closer to 1. So it could be that
So we can
you're
wa-
going to see her today. So
Okay, all right. I just want to get it out. If she doesn't come in today and you guys talk to her, and again, it sounds like this is going to come up again for another advisory opinion, or at least we should invite her for the next meeting,
I think so.
regardless,
It
whether
would
we
be-
have an advisory opinion,
Yeah.
or whether we want to talk about this, or whether we want to talk about the ethics rewrite. Let's bring her in next meeting anyway.
And do you wanna hold that on this one, David, or?
I'd rather not, but I mean,
Can I ask a really
but
stupid
of course-
question? Could we, is there a way for us to sort of, is there a way for us to kind of finesse the ethics opinion by saying, we got a couple of issues here, we have this one viewpoint that.
oh, you mean this one and hold off?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you wanna
Oh.
get this one out.
I'd like to, but
So is there a way to get this out without, like, could we say, hey, either under this
picking
particular,
everything?
yeah, could we say, hey, either under this particular line of reasoning, the Julia line of reasoning,
yeah,
and the kind of these sort of, from a common sense standpoint,
right.
you know, this adjudicatory thing just feels wrong. Is there a way to kind of not hang our decision on one or the other so that we can?
Well, I don't think we are, we're just saying, the adjudicatory is out of the water right up front.
Yeah,
We don't need to reach the more difficult decision.
Right.
In fact, I mean, as
Yeah.
attorneys, we'd probably be well-trained, well, you're not supposed to put that all
Right,
in there.
right.
And why are we doing that? Well, I think it would be helpful personally. Um,
Yeah, you might be right, Dee.
See, so I don't
You can just
think,
hedge, right, and you can just say, like, this is a very narrow argument, and you can even hedge at some point saying, the board is not making any comment at this time about employees serving
Well,
on
I think
an
you say that.
advisory board.
I say that, yeah.
So I think as long as that's there, then you can always simply say later,
mm-hmm,
and now that we've considered the whole
Right.
thing, we're up to
That's
opinion
right.
that no boards and
Right.
commissions, or we decide.
Or
to
that we
run
wanna
with
split it
this,
up.
You know, or we wanna split
and that's
it
where
up.
we can bring Julie in.
Yeah.
Do we
Because-
wanna get into all this stuff right now because it is such a narrow issue, Dee, and you do kinda say that?
I say the second to last
Yeah.
paragraph, in light of the adjudicatory nature of the boards in which you wish to participate, however, it is not necessary for the board to weigh in on the two positions in reviewing the current
Yeah.
case.
And you do say up front
Yeah.
earlier too,
So,
although not before the board.
I think we should just give Julia the respect of saying,
Yeah.
is there anything we've misrepresented about
Okay.
the second position?
And if there is, we can hold it off. If
Right.
not, I can sign it next week.
But I'd also,
But-
I think it would be helpful to have her come in because,
Right.
again, this just comes up again and again and again.
But we'll plan on having her come back next month anyway,
Okay.
for any number of different reasons.
Yeah,
Is that fair?
yeah.
Yeah, sorry
Okay.
to screw this up.
No,
Taking us down a funny path, but
No,
yeah,
no,
I hear you,
uh-uh.
so that makes sense,
no.
yeah.
I told you not to talk to Steve Strom about it.
Yeah.
Get you all rolled up.
But Becky, I also appreciate your input on that because
Yeah.
our instinct was what you were saying.
Mhm.
And yet we
Although
thought, well,
practically, I mean, I guess my practical question, again, back to like whether if we take the position that no municipal employee and no spouse of a municipal employee can serve on any board or commission, are we then in the position of essentially kicking people off, like existing board members off of boards right now?
that's a good question.
Like, because I think I feel like with all of the decisions that we make, part of it is sort of a reading of the code, and part of it is just sort of a practical line in the sand that's reasonable in a community of our size, you know, I mean, if
Mhm.
we take a firm line position that no employee of any part of the municipality, including the school board, the school district, including the police,
That's a good
including the
point.
fire department, or their spouse can serve on a municipal board or commission, are we then taking, half of the eligible,
Qualified people to
Yeah,
be
and
boards.
where is I have kind of a practical question with the line too, because I think that with Jillian, it feels a certain way because she worked in planning for a long time and has a certain leadership role in the municipality right now. But if it were the wife of a fire chief, I would feel differently, I don't know, I mean, she has, it would have, the gut feeling would be different. And so I think I'm interested in having that practical knowledge before we consider the bigger question too, just because it, and again, in a community of our size, the ideal may not actually be achievable or desirable if we spread it to the rule too broadly.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, let me look into that a little bit. I
Okay.
think it is actually very limited.
Mhm.
Because Joanne said, what about this, what about this, what about that person? And in fact, it was very,
Mhm.
very limited.
And maybe something to think about in the ethics code, right, of how
But
much.
that's where I need to
that's-
know
How
that.
much,
That's
how much
right.
executive authority does someone have to have before?
Right.
Because it makes sense to me that maybe the mayor's wife shouldn't be,
Right.
in charge of a commission, but again, comparable wife of a patrolman police department
Mhm.
may be completely fine and not having kind of guaranteed propriety or actual propriety.
And I wonder, Dan, there's nothing in the charter about this, because it seemed like that would be, the place aside from the ethics code,
I
where you
think-
might have a definition of like, who's actually eligible to be on boards.
No, it's not.
There's nothing
And there's
in there
just,
about-
I believe there's a generic statement about conflict of interest, which isn't helpful. Okay, but that's a good distinction. And then, see, this is what is important about the next meeting, having
Mhm.
Julia here. And it is a small community, and these are people who are,
Oh, yeah,
you know,
I mean-
to finally just take off someone's wife who's been involved in some
Mhm.
area forever, who's, you know, instrumental and developmental programs and.
Well, it's all these things, you know, if it was an ideal world, we could rule out people who are actively coming before commissions, but sometimes those are the most qualified people in our community, and there's just no
Exactly.
way to actively have qualified people and then, you know, and not have any kind of active conflict come up. It just is the reality of how big our community is.
And I don't think, I'll reread this opinion, but I don't think it suggests there's a blanket rule about employees or anything, that this, in this particular case, you have a high-level executive.
Yeah.
And the other thing is whether maybe in the rewrite we look at it, does it become a case-by-case analysis? And maybe they deserve that kind of attention. These are generally pretty instrumental people, and then maybe it deserves a case-by-case analysis, especially now that we're not doing school gifts. This will be our new area of expertise.
Right.
Okay, well, good. Good question,
Okay.
good points, Beth.
C, that's confidential. And that's yours, D. Let's see, let me look at that.
This is one where we just thought it might be important to do a two-paragraph, and I have not done that yet, a two-paragraph that says we're not gonna have people withdraw these after a negative response. And that where the ethics code does not provide for discretion, we are not going to apply any. This was that foreclosure one, yeah. And so that's a two-paragraph I just need to pull together. So Terry, you can say, D, this is a really important topic, and
I'm sorry, I just read this.
I'd like it done by next
Yeah.
meeting.
D, this is a very important topic.
Okay.
I think we need this done by next meeting.
Okay. So noted.
No, let me.
Well, I hate to say, D forwarded something to me on that, and I
Mm.
sent it to Steve, just to
Right.
proofread it, and the guy, I mean, it's just, I don't know what he's doing, I hope he's really busy.
Oh, and I'm sorry, could you repeat that again very quickly? What are the two, I just read this again. What are the two paragraphs? Some of
That
the stuff
one
is still
that,
lingering from when I wasn't here.
That
Remember,
we're,
he's requested confidentiality, right?
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
except that we are going to be issuing an opinion,
Mhm.
and just, it gets scrubbed, so.
Right.
But in our scrubbed opinion, that once someone does a request for this, and when he gets a negative response, they don't get to withdraw it.
Oh, okay.
Number one, and
Oh.
then number two, just, this happened to be an area where there was no discretion granted to the ethics board.
You know, didn't the code
Right.
say, like, just like,
No.
for
Yeah.
emphasis, there is actually no discretion
Right.
here.
We don't want them involved.
In fact, I think in fact, it said anyone who provides discretion is in violation.
Right.
So it was worth,
Extra clear.
like two paragraphs.
Okay.
I also think it's important for the ethics board to acknowledge their own jurisdiction.
Yes. No, I think that's right.
So, okay, so.
Okay, that sounds
So it's
good.
important that I get this done. by
So
next
that'll be
meeting.
Plus,
for next meeting.
I wanna show you something, I don't wanna.
Posting shall be made within 14. What is posting of what? Is there a portion?
Of the decision.
Oh, and weren't you going to do that or something? No, but seriously, weren't we going to?
No, I mean, the actual decision, once the
Oh.
decision's made, it should be posted within 14 days.
That will no longer appear in the ethics. That is done.
Okay.
It was the last time you'll ever need to worry about that.
That were replaced by 14 weeks.
Okay, and
One calendar year.
D. Again, you're up again for the two free tickets from Alaska Airlines
Well,
for a
and
raffle.
we all thought that was fine, but what was interesting is because we didn't get our opinion out, the union for the firefighters did it instead. So I said, oh, okay. There were two tickets that were received from Alaska Airlines by the fire chief, which is routine. Alaska Airlines donates things all the time. And then they wanted, AFD wanted to auction them off and take that money and help purchase an antique fire thing. And we had said that we thought, we looked at both parts of that transaction, said it seemed fine to us. And I was to write up an opinion in the meantime, because they want their opinions on a timely basis. They got the union to do it instead, which is a nonprofit corporation, not part of Anchorage,
Oh,
of the municipality. So it was accomplished.
Oh.
No.
See, she's her goal.
Ethics by procrastination.
Mhm. Well, and you know, part of it, we thought about this one in terms of maybe doing that quick little question and answer part. I'm beginning to think that's not going to turn out to be what it is, because everything seems to be so much more than, so.
You want me to
So-
remove this one?
Yeah, let's just remove.
So is that taken care of then?
Yes.
That's no longer an issue? Okay.
There's a question number 2. that we kept on for the same reason. just a
Yeah,
short
the members,
paragraph.
are you talking about the Fire Retirement Medical Trust? That one? I assume,
Oh, is that that's the little opinion on the first page?
No, this was the
Hmm.
one I got from through email. And the members of that medical trust were wondering whether they should have to do disclosures of present economic interest. Because obviously they're all interested in,
Can I
That
just back
trust.
up though? I think this was, the second page was actually the little proposed answer to the,
oh,
but you know, really when you read through it, it doesn't provide any helpful information to the public. Right, it just says, no, we don't think there's a
Mhm.
problem, so it's not helping anybody.
mhm.
So,
Okay.
yeah, let's just scrub it.
Let's just,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Okay, let's see.
And then the medical trust? What was that?
is the police and fire retirement board
Oh,
exempt?
from the Board of from the Ethics Code?
No, from
maybe?
filing present economic
Oh.
interest disclosures.
And I was gonna try to do a legal analysis on that, so I
Mhm.
haven't done that, so that would be important for next meeting.
Okay,
So you have to
So it-
determine whether that
That's-
board is actually a municipal board or
Right.
not.
It
You're
is.
saying sometimes it is and sometimes it
oh, the
isn't.
Retirement Medical
Well,
Trust?
it's certainly a municipal entity, whether, and their one employee is considered an employee, remember, he's been before the board. But I think it's a legal analysis, so the question is whether they should have to file a.
Are members of the
Present
Police
economic
and
interest
Fire
disclosure.
Retirement Medical Trust required to file annual disclosures of present economic interest?
And it would be the board, that's what we're
Mhm.
getting at. Okay,
The
now
board
that's
or
interesting, because the board is not
trust?
municipal employees. There's a police and retirement board, and they're generally ex-police and fire.
Mhm.
And that group has an employee who is or is not a municipal employee, but he did come before the board before.
Mm.
So are the board members exempt? So that's interesting, okay.
Okay.
I need to get that done. I have to
Okay.
do that.
All right, so now we're on to the ethics rewrite. Ooh. Dean?
Can,
Yeah?
I'm gonna say-
The only, I went to the last meeting before the subcommittee of the assembly, or the committee, ethics and elections committee. And they specifically wanted an update
Oh,
on
and-
how it's going, and then the next meeting is canceled. That's what we talked about earlier. So the next meeting is going to be in August or whatever.
do you know, is it gonna be August or
It's
July,
gonna-
September?
It's not gonna be July 27th, which
Oh.
is the end of this month, so it'll be August, the end of the last
Okay.
Wednesday.
They don't
in
want it done, they
August.
just want an update on what's going on. I think that we gave them kind of a
I think
fall
I
deadline, didn't we?
Yeah.
I thought we gave them August.
I thought it was August, yeah.
Oh.
But which is
Oh.
we did.
fallish to me.
Yeah, okay.
So, it will be done by then, but what we should do is, our next meeting, be able to review that rewrite.
Mhm. Now, if I remember, you were gonna take 4 or 5 days and just like
Just
block
do
it
it.
out. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And, but we brought up a couple of areas today that I do probably need some help,
Mhm.
I mean, advice ahead of time. And one of them is, the whole gift things for elected officials. I get at least 1 to 2 per week, elected officials or administrative executives who are offered 2 free tickets, please come to this event. And it's again and again, it's Girl Scouts, it's
Mhm.
everything. And it's always over the $50 limit, they all seem to be $150. Of course, that $150 is a built-in charity element to it. So I don't know if we have time today for 15 minutes to discuss the pros and cons of that. And then the other one was, this whole serving on boards and commissions. There was, as Terry and I saw at we had a little assembly training thing on the ethics code, and they brought that up as well, because Forrest Dunbar was invited to the Catholic Social Services Ball, and he could not believe that he could not go.
Mhm.
And then there was another one, John
Well, he
Whittleton,
certainly
same
could
thing.
go.
Oh, yeah,
Can't
that he
be
could not.
pumped.
couldn't be
Right,
pumped.
just have to pay for it.
Right.
Yeah.
And whether if when we come to the end of today's agenda, just discuss that, just like, for instance, that one is, and he was hoping that would be addressed in the our rewrite. But because it is just a frequent topic, again and again, I get that. And are we at the end of our agenda yet? I was gonna say, there's one other thing that I forwarded to Lisa.
We just have some new business.
It's under
Okay.
new business.
Oh, okay. All right, well then-
Which is kind of where we're at. So just to be clear though, for the Code of Ethics rewrite, you're gonna set aside a time between now
Yep.
and whatever.
And-
And don't hesitate, if something comes up while you're doing this and I can help you, just call me,
Okay.
just email me and I'll try. I've got a trial
Okay.
in August, but let me.
When is our next meeting?
We have to discuss a new schedule. We need to know Terry's new class schedule.
Mm.
Oh, right.
And we want a different day besides Monday. Mondays are hell. from
Mondays
what I
are tough.
understand. Yes.
Yeah.
It's brutal. I
to
got that
go.
email, I had
Yeah.
forgotten we were meeting this week, I got that email
Yeah.
Friday, I was like, oh, no.
Mondays are tough. Yeah. I'm still recovering from the weekend.
Well, and Steve's impossible to get a hold of during the weekend, so it's
That's
just,
right.
it's not, yeah, he's clearly not reliable anyway, but it's just. Let me see how-
Oh. That's right, there's a new advisory opinion. Did you want to talk
I'm
about
not
that?
sure which one.
The one that you were gonna pass out, 7B. So 7A is the canceled meeting of the Ethics and
Mhm.
Elections Committee, and 7B is the one you sent me an email this morning.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
This is simply, it just, I have the board read through it,
Mhm.
but a
7B.
chiropractor is, wants to see, we were planning to give to each fire chief, along with a loaf of cinnamon bread from Great Harvest, to offering a chiropractic and massage, an aligned chiropractic and massage to each firefighter. Let's see, and I guess there are announcements actually on the second page. We would like to invite you to select one man or woman from each station for a complimentary adjustment and/or 1-hour massage. Obviously, their way of building business, but I mean, we look at it from the recipient's viewpoint. Terry, you looking at your schedule?
I am looking at this.
Okay, 'cause
Yeah.
Terry is one of the people that was vociferous on this subject, so we need his full attention.
Oh, sorry, gotcha.
Right, I mean, the concept that if their building turned out to have a fire, would they go there first? Faster? Would they-
It's a variation on the police
Free
and the
tax.
tax. scene.
Right, yeah.
Firefighters feel a little different to me
It's
than
interesting
police.
that it's only one person per station.
I know,
So that's
yeah.
interesting, like, that's sort of a different twist, like, I feel
Yeah.
like the tax thing was a blanket,
Yeah.
like, they should get
Right.
every
Yeah,
single
right.
officer
Yeah.
in their sort of
It could be dry.
camp, but. put their names in the hat and-
Well, and again, I mean, I think what sort of rankled us, at least for the Liberty tax one, right, was the idea of, police law
Police.
enforcement and the concern, Ted had particularly had the concern that he thought it really would create a potential influence on how law enforcement might occur. And so I think this to me like sort of sounds maybe a little bit like the Olive Garden case that we did a few years ago, where sort of saying, what's the potential downstream effect of providing this kind of service to firefighters? Do they have sort of like, fire code inspection coming up or something like that? And if there's no downstream, if you can't really see the downstream effect, then I guess I don't particularly have a problem with it.
Well, it may be a random selection, though, of the recipient per station versus the
Mhm.
head of the station gets to pick which person gets it. Would that be a safety issue? I mean,
Well, what would that safeguard
Yeah, I mean-
against?
Yeah.
What would that safeguard against? I'm just trying to think of
Yeah.
like what.
oh, it's just kind of
vis-a-vis
favoritism. I mean, the
Okay.
head of the station gets it and gives it to his best
But isn't
buddy.
that kind of
or-
an internal issue?
Yeah, isn't that an
You
issue?
think?
outside?
Yeah,
'Cause
I mean,
in some
it-
ways they use it as an incentive, like
Mm.
Right.
you've been on time for the last
Right.
month, you get the massage. Like, do we care?
Yeah, I hesitate to get
You're
involved in how
the
the
one that
person's.
fell off the ladder last month, right?
I mean, I guess in like an internal, like an internal
Yeah.
decision,
Okay.
a supervisory issue that's
Mhm.
internal to the fire department, if the decision isn't,
Yeah, I mean,
you
why
were kind
meddle?
last month, but
Okay.
I like you and your haircut better than the rest of my staff, you know, or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah, I don't know, why meddle in their business?
Yeah, I would put this one under the Olive Garden type.
I just
thing,
say
that if we
go,
don't
no
see
go,
the
yeah.
downstream effect, in the Olive Garden case, we didn't, right? We say
Right.
like, look,
Mhm.
it's, you know, though I think the value per firefighter was lower, right? The value, they said that the value per firefighter was gonna be like $25, $30 or something like that, but.
Yeah, and we actually hit under that one last time,
Yeah.
under the
Right.
$25 or $50, which this is probably more than that.
Mhm.
But I guess one of my recommendations, if the board is satisfied with this, is just to say a yay or nay versus an opinion.
Mhm.
You know, this is our hard area, what do we do when
Mhm.
they're over, but that's why they come to an ethics officer or to the board.
Yeah, I say yay, and then not meddle with how they
Mhm.
choose. Just say yay, nay, not complicate it, and say, yeah, but if someone else has that problem, I don't.
I just think, yay.
And remind
Yeah,
me,
Okay, like, well, yeah, I have no.
The only
Yeah.
reason to say more than yay is just the instructive thing.
Right.
Of course, we might be concerned about setting a precedent,
Yeah.
but the Olive Garden one's already out.
Yeah.
Go back
Yeah.
and look at it, I think the logic's gonna be pretty much, well, you're right, we did hide, I think,
yeah,
under, but I think I'm almost certain that opinion at least mentioned that we didn't see any downstream effect, that we didn't see the Olive Garden wasn't up
And
for, you know, fire
this is the same
inspection for the
requester.
next 4 or 5 years,
and,
so.
oh,
That's funny.
and remind me again, what was our distinction for the tax, liberty tax? What, how did we justify saying no to that one?
My recollection of that is, oh, I'm sorry, Terry, you were the primary.
What was,
proposal
how did we
on that.
differentiate?
We thought that it created at least the appearance of a conflict of interest, and if not more. I mean, Ted was very adamant that he felt that receiving those kind of services would influence
Yeah.
the way a police officer might, if they pull one of the liberty tax people
Right.
over, or something like that it would have an influence
Okay.
on how they were treated. And to hear that from a former cop is
Yeah.
enough, for this board, was enough to be like, okay, that's too much then.
So it was just basically varying degrees that reached too far. Okay, and we're saying this varying degrees is close enough to the Olive Garden versus, okay,
Well, you just sort of ask yourself,
Yeah.
what's the
I
downstream
know.
effect?
Yeah.
And again, I mean, police are held probably to the highest standards, I think
Mhm.
rightfully so, because they are the law enforcement officials in the city. And so any kind of gift that's given to them, what's the potential downstream effect?
Mhm.
Well, that any one of them, any day, could be the one that pulls you over on the road. And if you've just recently received a gift from them,
Mhm.
there's more than enough social psychology to show that there will be
And there
likely
was more
some
potential for
bias.
the appearance of impropriety too, right? That's
Versus
part
the
of our
fire
discussion
department.
versus
Yeah.
the fire department. There's
They don't
sort
have the same kind of
it
presence
seems,
on the street,
Yeah, very,
yeah.
very unlikely that there would be discretionary.
Right.
I mean, don't get to be like, well, we're not gonna put that fire out.
Right.
Like, you know, there's no equivalent of sort of getting,
Yeah.
a warning.
It's a
versus
different kind of
citation or
trust,
something
and there's
like
actually a
that.
new breakthrough book coming out that really focuses on that kind of
Steve Strong.
Yeah, did he co-write it?
I gave it to Steve Strong to proofread 3 months ago, and the guy just won't get back to me.
So it really is, we're kind of doing this on a factual, case-by-case sort of deal.
I think that's
okay.
right, I think that's all right. I mean, like firefighters play a different role,
Okay.
if I can, too. We trust them in a
Yeah.
different way than we trust police officers, different kinds of discretion at play.
Okay.
And again, what's the downstream effect for a firefighter receiving a massager? I don't know, they're gonna be more aggressive. Fighting a fire if their
Right.
massage place catches fire. I don't think so, just.
Yeah.
There's-
Okay.
And again, I think for us empirically, we're like, well, gosh, will a free tax service
Yeah.
make any difference? But, again, having a former cop here and Ted saying in his opinion it would.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it's just, not that I'm uncomfortable, it's just a little different not having something a little more concrete as far as a rule.
Yeah, I mean, I
but-
feel like we had a lot of discussion around that, the last
But-
question also about whether, because the code doesn't say anything explicitly
Right.
about not giving anything to the fire, to the police department, right? And I feel like we kind of came down where almost anything that was given to
Right.
the police department would make us uncomfortable, but we didn't have the
Right.
authority to say that was definitely the rule, so maybe
Right.
again, another question for.
Well, yeah, it really is.
Yeah. Okay, so I say yay and
Just yay. Okay.
Just yay.
I'll just write back yay.
is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's one item that's not on the agenda any longer. It's the $1 for dogs because we put it away, just needed an
Oh.
opinion to sign off on.
Okay.
So.
And I need
was
to do
just
that.
Reminding you.
Are you drafting
That's me
that?
too. Well, I've
Oh.
already drafted the opinion, but it
Oh.
was the quick portion.
Oh,
Yeah, we
couple
It's like a
wanted to-
little, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, good.
And Terry, here's a question for you. If you, you know what would not be bad for me? If you wanted me to get started on this Lance Wilbur thing, my magical window of time, I think, would be for a couple of days this week.
Oh,
You want
okay.
me to get started on it and then just see how far I get and then pass it off to you?
If you
Would that
don't,
be
if
helpful
you
to
don't
you? or-
mind, yeah, sure. that'd be-
Okay, and then I can get from you, Lisa, what do I need? to get from
Recording.
you? A
I will put it in
recording,
that-
Thumb drives kind of.
I'll put it in the Unified folder for you.
Okay.
Okay.
And Dee, I may ask you, because I seem to remember having some questions just about what you do.
Oh, sure,
I may
sure.
ask you if you're around this
Yes.
week.
And that was a pretty exhaustive meeting on that whole issue
Yeah.
and what he did, but yeah, no problem
Yeah,
at
I
all.
remember Becky having, and we were, how do we sort of cut the line on that one? We parsed some definitions and.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, and to be
That's
honest,
good.
yeah, in fact, the main thing
Months
that's sort of has slowed me up on that one is that I just don't remember entirely
Oh,
the
you-
fact pattern.
yeah.
I mean, like, and
Not
I'm not familiar
essential.
enough with the workings of the
Mhm.
city to say, like, he signed off on a pay item, I see that, I'm like, what the hell is a pay, you know, what I mean, it's just like, just the
Yeah, so
minutia
that
of
might
what
help.
exactly the
Yeah,
facts
I
were.
can-
If you could do even that much, then I'd be happy to, I mean, I could do the analysis like that, but it was just getting the facts straight
Mhm.
again, I was like,
Mhm.
and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to the meeting, and even then, I'm not sure, just based on,
You know,
because
the
we're
few
relying
things
so
that
much
help
sort of
you-
on D, on yours
Yeah.
sort of like, here's what it means, here's what he's doing, and I'm like, oh,
The
okay.
tapes are helpful, and then D is always helpful, because I almost always, when I write an opinion, have to go to D and say, D, what does this department do? And then it, I mean, it works.
Seriously, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way I was like,
We've got a resource, you know?
it's like I remember like, you know, what we wanted to say to him, and, but it was like, but
Facts.
filling in the first part of the opinion, it was like, I'm not sure, I don't know the facts well enough. I know he signed off on something, it was relatively pro forma, his wife was involved, but what exactly, like, that's
Yeah.
not enough for a published opinion.
Okay.
So Lisa, you can dump it in, you'll dump it in there today.
I'll put your name on it. Mhm.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and I asked Steve to do some research on that, never heard back.
Okay.
So it's just.
Okay, and then the next, I think that's it, generally. So we have time to talk about that issue if we wanna.
And here's another one that came in. I could just tell you, it is 4 businesses on the 500 block of 6th Avenue downtown want to show their appreciation for public safety officers by giving them a bunch of discounts for July 27th all day. So 15% off at Willowall Restaurant, 5% off on the outlet, and all that, whatever they money is they get, they're going to send it over to the American Cancer Society. And I thought this probably relative, I didn't make copies, it just came in. I thought it was, it would fall under our gift exception to anything to a large group of public employees. It's a discount. It's to all municipal employees, so it's even broader, all municipal employees, firefighters, police department. I mean, to me, it's a gimmick. It's, and I don't see a downside to it. If you go, you get a 5% discount.
Yeah. I think the broad stuff is sort of saves it too, but it's not specific to police officers and everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was one. And then the last one was, again, someone in the administration pretty high up being invited by ConocoPhillips to go to the reception honoring 2 former governors, $150 tickets. And assuming that there's no personal relationship, I mean, if there's a personal relationship, it falls outside of the ethics code anyway. Assuming there's not a personal, that, you know, the head of Conoco just said, oh, I'll just call over to the city and get somebody relatively high in the administration. What do we think of that? What are our standards? And this comes up again, and again, and again. Probably 2 to 3 of these per week.
It's just under that general rule, right, Dee? Just that
Yeah.
general gift rule.
Well,
Yeah.
because it's, go ahead.
No, isn't it just under the general, it doesn't fall in any of those safe harbors, so isn't it just under the general and any employee may not accept a gift from an individual or entity with interest that may be substantial? Or is this wrong?
Well,
Because
I
it's
think
not
our-
just an employee.
I think our problem there is that we said, okay, here's 5, 6 safe harbors.
Right.
And if it doesn't fall with it, then you have to come to the ethics board or the ethics officer, i.e. me, to go over things like conflict of interest, appearance of impropriety. So theoretically, I could respond and say, doesn't seem like a problem to me, but I thought, as long as we're meeting today, and it just came in, I would throw that to you. The other reason is, again, because of the rewrite.
Yeah.
And do we care that an administration person and his wife is going to go to this benefit?
What's the applicable code provision?
Is it, are we talking about an elected official?
No, no,
Meaning
just
employee?
administration. Here, why don't I give you this? I printed it out.
Just the regular old.
Just, yeah, but high up in the
High up,
administration.
yeah. Okay.
So,
So,
although should that even matter anyway? If it was well, I guess if it was a lower level employee, you'd have less chance of any type of
Right.
influence.
so it's just a general rule, isn't it? So any employee may not accept
Yeah.
a gift from any individual or entity of interest that may be substantially affected by the performance of the person's official and media duties under circumstances where the timing and nature of the gift would cause a reasonable person to question the person's judgment in exercising official municipal duties. So.
Oh, she's here. Well, let's switch out of this then.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll give Julia a
Yeah.
chance to breathe. Watch out for small child, did you see that?
I saw
Oh,
that,
I
a little
just fell
baby
asleep.
there.
Let's go, waited to the end of the meeting, of course.
I know, he's finally asleep. Now that we're about to adjourn. Everyone's
Can
tolerant
we
of
please just change it for a few minutes?
Julia, do you have a copy of that opinion we were looking at? Let me give you. What is this, Julia? We wrote this advisory.
I'm straight from, just so that, I'm straight from, I had today off, and so I'm straight from physical therapy. And I had been working late on Friday. I missed totally
Okay. Well, we can wait
the
till that.
invitation, so,
No,
This-
thank you for coming in.
yeah, no worries. Yeah, thank you for your service.
Yeah.
And a committee like this is, convened, I will try and always make myself.
Julia, have you had a chance to read that, or I can paraphrase it too, but there's.
Yeah, so you could paraphrase it.
Basically, Jillian Inglis, who is now a executive in the ER department, and formerly 20 years on land use issues as staff at Elmore, has asked whether she could serve on one or more of the land use boards. And they're all defined as adjudicatory under the Title IV. And so the board believes that as it is an adjudicatory function, that she essentially be serving two masters. So that certainly as to adjudicatory, no. As to advisory, which we don't need to reach, but there was a discussion that there were the two sort of points of view, the one being if they're not specifically prohibited, an employee is not specifically prohibited from serving on a board, then they could, and then the second view being that the ethics code defines them exclusively.
That's right, and so that was by design. So that the only exception to the exclusivity is the mayor, who happens to be both an elected official and a full-time municipal employee. So with the exception of the mayor, which was sort of an oddball class, the assembly, members who were sponsoring the code were very particular about wanting to have divisions, and have the definitions be mutually exclusive between all three of those. And they, were concerned about basic, conflict of interest that could happen in, as you already pointed out, that serving two masters. To have an adjudicatory body needs to be removed from the municipal parties. Otherwise, we're not serving the agency adjudication. We don't have due process, we don't have fairness if it's being stuffed, so to speak, with people who report to the administration. Doesn't look good to the community. They've had different concerns about that historically, and so they were really particular about that. And then on advisory boards, why is it? We want to hear, if it's an advisory board to the assembly, we know what the administration thinks. So why do we want to have municipal employees on our advisory boards that are coming as just another shot for the administration to stuff the advisory board with people who are going by the program? And so that didn't matter if it was conservatives on, you know, if the assembly was in control of the conservatives and the mayor's office was controlled by the liberals, or the assembly controlled by the liberals and the mayor's office controlled by conservatives, or even it was, we already know, we can ask, we have the ability, we the assembly, what they told me, have the ability to call up any individual who wants to, whose opinion, you know, whose opinion is valued by us, aside from the board, and you can see that they have done this sometimes where, there was a great deal of skepticism a couple of times, about, in the last part of Mayor Sullivan's term, but it is, I'm just using that because those are the most recent examples, but where instead of hearing from the city manager, they wanted to hear from the police chief, you know, even though the police chief reported to the city manager. So they can call up that person and ask them if they have somebody who's been corresponding with them, they can do that. And people are welcome to say their own opinions. You know, say I'm acting not on behalf of the municipality, like let's use Jillian. I'm in this position, but this is not an opinion, you know, from my department, but in my 20 years experience, this is what I think about this. And you know, people, you can see historically that the assembly values stuff like that, but not as a member of a board under the code now.
And it's sort of interesting too, that in an advisory board, most of the ones we're talking about report to the mayor. So theoretically, the mayor could the mayor put somebody on his own board and it affects sort of credibility? But as you're saying, hey, the mayor can call Joanne and ask her opinion on something. Is it helpful to have her actually a member of the advisory board? So it's just as the assembly could call any of these administrative people. And I guess we're looking at the intrinsic value of that 20 years of knowledge in an
Right, so one
advisory
thing
board
to do-
capacity.
One thing to do, and this is what the assembly has done on other things, and it's not necessarily in the ethics code, permission to do this, but but I think that the way, since you're gonna be engaging in rewriting the code, you know, some code
Mhm.
provisions, the way that that's been handled before is to have a person be a ex officio member of the board. So they're there to help staff, they're there to oversee, they're there to be a special representative of the mayor on the board. But they're not a voting member of the board. They're not, they get to have input, they get to guide, they get to be a staff contact, they get to, it's an important thing, but they're not, because what happens is that if a person is on a public board and appointed by the mayor, and also up through the channels, ultimately the mayor is the responsible individual, then people on the committee can too often assume that that person is speaking for the mayor, and then it inhibits, it's a dampening, it's a chilling effect on actual public participation and advice from all over it. What the assembly thought about before was that if the board is an advisory board and is supposed to be made up of members of the public, then if the mayor wants to know what employees think, just go out and ask them. You know, walk the talk, get out there, you know, learn from your employees, but you don't have to appoint them to a board to hear from them, as pretending that they're, sorry, did I just wait?
He agrees.
That they're providing input
Yeah.
from the public, right? But
Right,
they're-
right,
yeah.
that's the function, but I think that, you know, with the marijuana, situation with the assembly, it was important on the assemblies committee, to have, a representative of the industry as as an ex officio member. And that's what we learned when they sent us to Colorado. They said, do not try and do this in a vacuum. Find your best, industry representative, somebody that you can count on to have some sway with the industry, but be a reasonable voice, and have them sit. So we did that at the assembly level as an ex officio member.
Is there a dividing line at any point, in your opinion, between where someone is sufficiently sort of extenuated from the board they might sit on, where they would, I was thinking if you're a police officer and you want to send a planning and zoning commission, is there any point at which your position with the muni, do you think, is far enough removed from what you might do where?
Not under the way that it's drafted now, because of the reason of wanting it mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
And so I think it would take a code change to do that, and I think it's well worth revisiting, but that policy decision, I haven't had any instruction from the policy makers, my clients, to have any compelling reason why it should be looked at to have that kind of removal in there. And things have come, from time to time, we have had situations like that, but the rationale wasn't just that their duties were sufficiently removed.
Yeah.
It was who do they ultimately report to, and how are you gonna serve two masters? And that kind of goes to the core of, it's not an appearance of conflict, it goes to the core of what conflict is about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so going back to that, so whether a police officer could serve on P and Z, so you're saying, Julia, that is a conflict because it's two masters. It's not a case-by-case analysis.
Well,
It's
I
not
would
an
go back to
appearance
the top.
issue.
Right, I would go back to the top though. The first, for me, it's easiest because, to start with the code first, because the code can always be more restrictive
Mm-hmm.
than case law, or, you can't be more lenient than state, all the other things, but you can be more restrictive. So I look at the code first, and the first thing off the bat is that the definitions are mutually exclusive and intended to be that way. So boom, that's rule number one. Then if you drill down, and let's say we were gonna do, is it required to be mutually exclusive by code or law or anything? No, were the policymakers who approved the code required by some external factors to be that restrictive? And I would say they're not. That you could have done it differently. You could say that public boards could be any suitable member of the public, including municipal employees. And then you might want to put some fences around that, because municipal employees whose direct supervisory status is not, you'd have to figure out how to do it. But an example of the police officer, the police people have some other guards around their employment, so you couldn't necessarily fire a policeman because the way you didn't like how they voted on some kind of advisory board, or they were advocating for this or that. Plus, I think in the situation with the police, not only do they have that employee structure, but they report to the chief of police. The chief of police reports to the city manager. And then, and it's not the city manager that's appointing boards, and then it depends on what kind of advice are they advising the assembly? Is it a kind of a board that would be good to have somebody from law enforcement working for the city as a member? Then do you have them as an appointed member, directly, like that? Then you have another class of boards that are sort of that mixed thing where you want to have people on it. And then do they, is it something that they're going to be voting on? Are they going to be doing it? I think that there's certainly room to, because as we've talked about, the code is to manage conflict. And so in that serving two manner, the idea that even a policeman, even indirectly, is somehow a municipal employee, the conflict of serving two masters is being managed through this whole hierarchy of things, and that the importance of having either that person's expertise, even if they are a policeman, or somebody on the board who is a policeman and brings that in to something like P&Z, is, outweighs the somewhat diluted by the structure of their employment, the serving of two masters. But I think it would have to be a code change.
Well, and that's what we're considering too, besides the immediate ones that have come up.
Right, that's
Jill
what I
Lance was a
figured.
pretty clear answer. Do we want to get involved in this in terms of the code rewrite? I've explained that I get these type of requests just constantly from people who want to serve on different boards, and so far we've, adjudicatory, no, advisory, it hasn't come up too many times. And it's also coming up a lot in terms of spouses of people, of municipal employees. And of course, the higher up they are, the more that matters. So do we want to visit this in a code rewrite? I think at one point, one of Jill Ann's reasons, besides she enjoyed the area, was that they're having trouble filling some of the land use boards. And the police officer that I once said could serve on the Animal Advisory Board, I mean, that board finally, one of the two boards is defunct because we couldn't find people to serve on it. So was there a good reason at times? On your more active boards, P&Z, I can see the ex officio role. That might be a very interesting role, because then they have the day-to-day expertise of a former staff member without the conflict. But on some of these boards where they're having trouble staffing them, although I think that's relatively rare anymore. I think the boards are doing pretty well.
Yeah, we haven't used them all, but for a board adjustment, like for the first time since I've been here, we have 5 members. We have 3 or 4 regular members and our 1 alternate member, and that's like a big plus. So I think it does happen. I think that, what happens on sometimes what you can do is you don't have to necessarily change the ethics code. When you're creating the board, then you
Put it in Title IV.
Yeah, so that you want somebody who has a law enforcement background, you wanna have somebody that has this, you wanna have somebody like that, and then you can put in there that you can do, a notwithstanding thing, that this will be an exemption to the definition, so you don't. And I think that one of the things that maybe will happen with the code rewrite is that when you get to some areas like this, that what you might want to do is flag them for the assembly, because how are you going to write the code if you don't have a policy thing from the assembly to you sort of, from my view, you sort of start with it, and so we have, it's been a while now, and so the code's been in effect since 2007, so it's almost 10 years, and it's, had some maturing to do. So aside from any of the other things that you're looking at, is to frame it so that this is the rule now, and this is an area that the assembly would like some recommendations on, or has some other thoughts on, and how with it, like a little background. It'd be great if that got done here in the next year when I'm still around, so.
Oh, we've promised within the next month.
Yeah. Oh, you have a commitment for next month?
Mhm.
Wow, that's great.
We do. Okay. Well, Julia, if you wouldn't mind at some point, if you could read through that opinion and see the last page or so, I think is sort of reflective of some of the information you've given us. We don't say anything about the advisory board other than saying there seems to be sort of 2 positions, and I think we wanted to make sure that we were representing the second position correctly, and then we basically, it's all dicta, we could avoid it all, but I thought it was interesting because it's before us to say something about it.
And because it's likely that it would come up again soon.
And it's, yeah, and there's another opinion around the corner where this might become an issue too.
Biceps.
It's
Stuff
you're doing. I was thinking
curls.
I was thinking the same thing.
No.
His presence at the meeting today, again, next month he'll be with grandmother, but.
I mean, the kinds of things that I would think about, you know, were you asking me to edit this, which you're not, but were you asking me to edit this, then, you know, on the third page, you have whether these definite misspelled sections can be interpreted to prohibit employee board participation in most instances is not entirely clear. I would just leave that out.
Mhm.
You know, until you have it. How do you know that it's clear or not until you actually look at that issue?
Mhm.
You know, and so if the intent here is to, you know, then you just pick up with in light of the judiciary nature of the board issue intend to participate, scratch however, it is not necessary for the board to weigh in on, you know, on other things. So you don't have to say whether it's clear or not. You're not weighing in, so until you weigh in, then you get to say, if you weigh in, you get to say, yeah, it's clear or not clear. But,
Okay.
you know, if you're not doing it, then I think it's pretty, I think it's gonna work. To, you know, keep
Yeah.
it to the. Yeah, and so, you know, on the first page, the 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraph, to me, it's not so much raising the specter of the appearance of impropriety, it's raising the specter of conflict. It's not her conflict, it's the administration's conflict. I mean, you know, it's not just her personal actions in there, but what happens is that you're gonna run amok of some due process things. If I was on the other side of some land use adjudicatory thing, and I lose, and I find out that one of the members is appointed by the, ultimately, you know, all the way up by the mayor, then I'm gonna scream foul if they're an employee, because I'm gonna say that decision is tainted. And I think that concept of tainting the actions of the board is something that I would highlight, rather than a personal, because otherwise we're saying, but I would be exercising, you know, like,
Mhm.
yeah. But see, the thing is, you're just setting the city up for appeals. I mean, I'm gonna see him in Board of Adjustment, and then the Superior Court's gonna see him, you know. and
No, that I
so-
think so aligns with what my point was earlier. If I was, and cause I often represent folks who are on the side, I would make that argument with people that.
See, you got
know,
somebody
that
right
it-
here who has made that argument.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
you know,
The
so-
decision was not made
so-
by an objective party.
It's not, you know.
Especially if the staff came down on the other side, you know, if the staff
Mhm.
opinion and the coming down from the administration conflicted with the petitioner's request in front of P&Z, and then a decision
And the
was issued
board
by
was
the board.
loaded with,
That aligned,
with
yeah.
mayor's people. So I think, you know, making it that, then you have something that you have, it's not just, it's not de minimis to Joanne's. You know, it's not that the people, that the background isn't valued, it's that, you know.
Okay, well, I think that's very helpful.
I do think in considering a rewrite, we could create a clear line in the code, and thinking about this from, you know, the perspective of someone who might try and raise this challenge and appeal. If we had a clear line in the code, I think that would mitigate against that kind of appeal. Like if it said, you know, if the person's role is sufficiently attenuated from the board on which they sit, based on these criteria or something.
Right.
If we chose as a policy matter that seemed to be, was a desirable line to draw, I think that would
Right,
create
but the
enough
way
of
the
a
current code
distinction.
is now, I think that it's a due process problem. That appointing somebody on there, and that due process risk is greater than the need to have a person serve.
Because then it would bring up all sorts of disclosure issues at the beginning of every meeting, or to avoid some of that due process. Because this is always discovered after the fact, or so it seems.
Right, but what she's saying, and I agree with this, without a code change, if you had a code change and then they do, then you just do it. You do like Amy Demowski does. You know, we know, we're hearing this, but my, you know, and I'm sitting on the assembly, my husband is, on the fire. So, you know, she would be saying, I'm here sitting here, here's my disclosures, it's attenuated. Then the board would have a standard to say, okay, we decide if,
Yeah, you
you know,
think you're
you
this
have
way,
a
you should
conflict or
have this,
not.
yeah.
You know, depending on how close it is, but absent a code change.
Okay, but so we really are talking about code changes as well. So Becky, how would you feel if you were appearing before one of the adjudicatory boards and a police officer is on the board?
I mean, that's the thing, is I use that as an example because that one is, to me,
So
far enough
far.
anyway, that the gut response is, that's fine. You know, if I came before
Mhm.
P and Z and I was with GCI and we're proposing a cell tower project and the police officer votes against the cell tower because he thinks it's ugly, you know, it wouldn't, my initial response would not be, he was swayed by his employer, by the administration, this is an ethical violation. But if it was a person who worked, you know, in the administration here in City Hall, or if it was, you know, someone who worked in community development, then my gut response starts to be, you know, is the opposite. So I think it's trying to think about how to codify that gut response, if we want to in the code, rewrite that. I don't know how you would draw the line specifically, because, you know, I'm not sure how you could specifically, you know, codify that degree of attenuation. As a question, do we consider ASD employees to be municipal employees for the purpose of this? So if you're a teacher, you can't serve on a municipal body either?
That's right.
Okay, or a custodian, or anyone who works for the
Well,
school
and
district?
I'm not sure, I haven't looked into how many instances of that is going on, because it hasn't really been over the radar at this point,
Yeah.
you know, that, we are sensitive to it if it's current employees,
Uh-huh.
you know, MOA, civil hall employees, or city hall, excuse me.
And then do we consider contract employees or people who,
No. I
okay,
don't
so
think
just
so.
actual
No, the
employees?
original, the code that was in draft form and had been in draft form for, around 3 years before I came on, had the elected officials, the employees, the public members of the board like yourselves, and any contractor, all under, the same set of guidelines. But that never went. That's why it stalled for 3 years. So contractors were left out. When it got to the assembly, they thought, no, that's something that they were concerned about disclosure in contracting and not having administration people being able to appoint sole source contracts, you know, without having some hoops to make sure that the people who were requesting the service weren't involved in the selection of a sole source. And so there was some fences built into around that to manage that, but not to make it prohibited.
Well, can I switch topics now?
Mhm.
I feel fully informed on that last topic. If you don't mind, Julia,
Oh,
I'd
no.
like your input on something else
Yeah,
too.
sure.
One of the other things we're looking at is this whole, the Forrest Dunbar, can I go to an event? Someone wants to give me and my wife 2 tickets for $150 to a charitable event. Generally, a charitable event is what it is. And that's coming up again and again. To explain to the board, I get that same question dozens of times in every 6-month period of time. And I think Forrest had sort of said, is there any way we can do some modification of the code around that? And I have again got another one in the last day or two, whether ConocoPhillips invites 2 people, one person in the administration, and I say that the 8th floor administration, and a wife for $150 tickets to go to some upcoming celebratory thing of 2 former governors, Alaska governors. And you know, right now they ask me and I say, well, we have these safe harbor rules. These aren't elected officials, so they're the new rules, safe harbor rules. And if it doesn't come under the safe harbor, then it comes to an ethics officer or the ethics board. And what are the standards for that? I think that does need to be addressed in the rewrite. And I'm just curious, I mean, I'm putting you on the spot right now, but any input that you have on that, apart from the mayor's charity bar, because we would rewrite code to undo that decision, or parts of it. I mean, although that would no longer be the controlling sentiment that the business about ability to influence someone at the event itself. But just, I mean, what are our concerns with somebody from the administration and their spouse going to these public events? So anyway, it comes up so frequently, and of course there's pros and cons. I mean, don't you want your top level people going to these type of events? Aren't they helpful? You know, you have police that want to go to Boys and Girls Clubs, charity events, and it just comes up in so many contexts. And are we cutting off?
I think that the approach to do is to figure out what you don't want to do. You know, where is that going to be a problem? And that's where the criteria and things that were laid out in that charity ball opinion came as such a surprise, because I think the assembly at that time in drafting it thought that they weren't looking at exposure. It seemed like that letter, the opinion, was really looking at campaign exposure, as if this was all going on in the middle of a campaign, and that certain people got exposure and stuff like that, whereas it wasn't during a campaign, it was after. You know, that particular one was odd, but you know, it wasn't, it seemed to be cutting your elected representatives off of more than one group of things that they could and would participate in, whereas they might not otherwise. And that should be favored, sort of. I mean, you want, it helps the charity to have dignitaries there. It helps, you know, and so that they're guests, or, you know, so where is it that the concerns that may be reflected in that charity ball opinion really do come about? You know, where are the pinch points where going to as a guest at a function of somebody? And so to me, it's really for the elected officials that I report to me, where that conflict would be is if they're going as a guest to somebody who has recurring business, current or recurring, or a history of recurring business in front of the assembly. Then they can be pals, but don't be bringing, want to go with your buddy to the thing, then pay your thing, but, pay your own way. But if there are people who it's an opportunity for networking and building trust in the community, and that wasn't recognized in that letter. That opinion made it look like it was not building trust, and it was like
it emphasized the
trust.
networking, but that cuts both ways,
but in a
right?
bad,
And
but in a bad
that
sense.
opinion
And
emphasized access and influence.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
and so that you comp people for the charity ball, right? You comp people these tickets, now they sit at your table for the whole night, they are your guest, that you paid for them to be there. That's access, and that's influence, and we know that's true, right? I mean, we know that kind of access provides influence. And so the networking cuts both ways.
Right. So anyway, so that's, I think, where the policy shouldn't be set by this board. That's where I think the assembly gets to decide where they're gonna set the policy about that. And it was unintended, that the, categories in there were, because it was an area that they really wanted us to look at, because they didn't wanna be hampered by that, good, bad, or indifferent. So it's just ironic that even though they spent time worried about that, it became even more restrictive than what it was before they did the code. And so I really think that that's a policy call, that the assembly should understand that that's their policy call. And if they want a different call, they're gonna have to write it differently, and then take whatever heat there is, you know, about that, because as Terry points out, I can remember, when I worked for the state, there was an investment banker who came into town, and he was always willing to, take people in my organization out to lunch and stuff like that, and for me, it happened to be a burden. I was like this, only I had 2 of them, and I was a single mom, and it wasn't easy to go to these functions, and the idea of a free meal really wasn't, you know, a big deal to me. But they were, you know, sometimes at nice places, but it just, you know, I wasn't driven by that. And also, I was always trying to get out of them. And then my eyes were open years later when I had a hotel business, and another friend had said, you know, we were waiting for more care payments, and they were shaky, and so this friend had told me that he did 2 things when he, you know, he always called up if he was gonna be late on his payments going to anybody, but he said on anybody who was paying him, when he got the payment, or when he knew they were doing payroll, he took over a dozen donuts, and by God, I did that every time, and I got a check from Market, because the little people there, just, you know, it's like a courteous thing, well, we didn't have that much, but you might as well pay her, you know, $300,
Isn't that
you know,
amazing?
before you get there. So that was one, and the second thing was when I was sharing that with him, he said, oh yeah, he said, there's no doubt, when I go to Juneau, and when they say that you can't be bought for lunch, that's not true. And so, you know,
Recent study came out that pharmaceutical companies, even the notepads and the pens and the stuff like that, they actually did an empirical study, it demonstrably changes prescribing habits on the part of doctors. You can track it, you can even track it, you know, and so even these little trinkety type of gifts. We have such a deep unconscious reciprocity effect that when we receive things we want to give back, that we know that's true.
Yeah, so the thing that what I don't know, you know, when you were talking about when they come to that table and they sit at that table, they'd be sitting at that table if they paid for their own ticket, so who knows what that, I mean, that's the part that I didn't get, and especially in that particular situation, I thought there were other problems, potentially, once I thought about it, ML&P buying a table for the assembly and buying a table for the administration out of ML&P funds, but it wasn't the thing that was identified, you know, there, that somehow, because Jim Posey's budget came in front of it, that they would be influenced by that. I mean, you know, that was not, that wasn't on my radar and didn't meet my own bulletin board test. So to me, it's how given that there's the comping thing and that natural thing, what mechanisms are there at all to manage them? If somebody wants to, I mean, I don't know, so. But I think it's really up to the assembly to, because there's nothing intrinsic in state code that says that they can't do that,
And I think we're getting instances of people, both administration and assembly, that would like it opened up and to be a little bit clearer. Does it then become just the general gift rule, timing and circumstances
well,
or something?
sometimes you're not the guest of a person, you're the guest of an organization.
Mm-hmm.
You know, an organization wants you to come, and they wanna fill tables, and so part of their deal is the price to go in, but they also want people who will spend money there. You know, and so so some people, you know, are in the category where they can buy their own ticket and they can spend that much money at the thing. Others it's helpful to, they're a draw, you know, you know, it's, the Diabetes Association is a great example. I mean, they have they're like a hotel, they have a rack rate for their price, but they're great about targeting groups of people and making sure that a core person in that group has a ticket or a few tickets, so that they will amass other people and come, but they're not in a situation like you talked about, would be sitting at my table. No, they got their own table, they got their own, they're freelance, they're not, and the diabetes doesn't show up in front of elected officials in any kind of direct way. But you could think of it in terms of, there are the municipal grants, so if you were drawing fences about it, if somebody has an active municipal grant application in front of the assembly, but I don't know how those go. I think some other group does it, and then the administration does that, and then the assembly gets an AIM or something.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
that's not
the
generally
assembly doesn't have any,
input
but
on
the administration does on who's getting selected, so you wanna, I'm all for having that direct conflict, and then maybe making it be that you could be the guest of an organization and not the guest of somebody wanting to go. I mean, it might be.
Yeah, if you're the guest of an organization and the organization didn't have interests that came before
And
the
you
city
could
or
fence
for
it
the
in
assembly,
even more
then
by
you could-
saying it's a nonprofit, then you're in the community chest.
Is it possible we have organizations in town that would never have an interest in front of the assembly? You know, I mean, I think
I
the
hate to-
challenge
I hate to
is
say
that
it,
we
I'm
have
not
to
sure
say,
we would.
I don't
I was
think we
gonna
do,
say,
I
yeah.
mean, I think we could draw a line around, sort of active interests that play in front of looking at the wording of the current code, the timing and nature of the gift would cause a reasonable person to question the person's judgment, like that, means I would rule out things that are actively in front of the assembly,
Right,
pending
that's
in
what I
front of
do.
the assembly,
We're
yeah.
too small to say that they're never gonna
Never,
have.
I would be hard pressed to find an organization that wouldn't at some point perhaps have some kind of legislative interest at play in front of the assembly, or in front of, because this extends to staff as well, or in front of some body that has staff who might have been invited.
But I think that the first step there, if I was gonna advocate opening it up, and it would be for the community service organizations, to be able to invite, people, and then the question would be, do they get to invite all assembly members, or is it just selected assembly members, or, how does that happen? When they do that, do we have to think about that? Does the assembly have to think about that? But I think that the non-private party, whether the private party is ConocoPhillips or an individual, that if you take out the non-private parties, then at least you're in the community chest type of thing, and the argument is made that the networking that is done there is positive, it's a draw, and the risk that it's gonna be manipulated for personal reasons is not there. If assembly members, if that gets to be their pet charity, and they're gonna do, okay, big deal, it's still within the community, it's what we're funded a lot by nonprofits, and stuff like that, so that's where I would go.
In this one, and also just in this one, it's the ConocoPhillips, a private group, but they're doing it for a community purpose to acknowledge past governors. So that's sort of interesting. They're private, but
Right, but
They're
where's
doing-
the funds going?
I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the.
Okay.
I feel like I could argue it's one size or one forever, especially thinking about how much charity and big businesses tie together, and thinking about like from GCI perspective, what you write for the event that is run by a charity, but GCI I feel like supports in some way most major charities. And
Yeah, they're usually a major donor.
Usually a donor to almost everything, so it's like, okay, then how far can you do? The same thing for Conoco, same thing for BP. I feel like most major charitable events in this town have one of those three companies.
Last Carolina.
Stamped on it, and other, so.
Yeah, so to me, the difference would be that and I don't see a problem with this, that the organization, like the mayor's charity ball is it's not the mayor, it's every, it's a independent organization like for Rondi or something. And so the difference may be that the tickets that go to elected members come from the organization and not one of the organization's sponsors. You don't sit at the GCI table.
Or get your tickets from GCI.
Or get your tickets from GCI. Somebody can, through the organization, say, okay, we wanna throw in, some tickets, we wanna design, so we have, so we acknowledge the Anchorage Assembly, and there's an assembly table, and we'll just fund that. Because they can't buy their own, they can't, the assembly doesn't buy its own table out of public funds, as a company could. And so, I said, okay, we're just gonna do an assembly table, and they got, seats 10, they can, figure out how they do it.
And I agree with your point that I think that a lot of times it's very helpful for charities. I think about every charity luncheon I go to, because they always are like, and here's the representative from the state, from the governor's office, here's the representative from the administration, just to show support from our various public entities, and so that's an important role also. Yeah.
Okay. Julia, thank you very much
Okay,
for coming.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you guys are looking at all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's great.
And we'll draw from your experience again, I know.
Yeah, yeah, no worries.
Expertise. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, we've reached 1:30. Do we have anything else? I think we covered it. Oh,
No.
are you okay?
No.
Oh.
No, I'm fine. It is that time.
No, I wanted to make sure we'd covered everything. I think we had, that was great input. Yes?
We need a new schedule.
Oh, yes, I
TK.
am,
Something other than Monday.
Tuesday, I teach it Tuesday at 2:30 and Wednesday at 1. So, but the rest of the week,
Maybe back to Thursday.
Thursday would be good for me.
Thursday.
Thursday is fine. Thursday is what we were originally, right?
Mhm.
It was my work schedule, and then we couldn't because we were teaching schedule.
Right.
Let's do Thursdays.
Thursday's fine.
And
Very good.
what are we doing, the second week?
Yeah, we were doing the second.
Second week of the month? Okay.
So assembly meeting.
Because that also,
assembly, second Thursday, yeah, that'd work.
okay.
Just after the meeting, before we start up again.
Okay, does that work okay
So
for
August
everyone?
11th?
August 11 would be the first one.
Okay,
Okay.
And then I'll send out an entire schedule until
Yeah.
December.
that'd be good.
Okay.
August,
So it gives me a couple weeks.
Yeah.
August 11th.
Oh, that's right, because we're towards the end here.
Did you get your question in? Remember when Julie walked in, you were talking about something, I can't remember what it was. Did you get what you needed?
We were talking about this gift.
Oh, the gift thing, so we got back to
So
it.
we
Yeah.
got back to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, hold it. Because we're towards the end of we're on like the fourth Monday. If we go to the second Thursday, we're only got 2 weeks between this meeting. Do we want to go to the fourth Thursday?
When is their next, the subcommittee's
it's
next?
nice, when I go to the subcommittee, it's nice to have a week or two in
In
between.
between? Okay, so they're gonna
Um,
be on the 24th. Okay, well,
Well, but the
It'll be
third,
Or
the
the-
4th
18th,
Wednesday.
I don't care.
And then we could do the 18th.
Or the 18th,
Just give a little bit more time
That's fine.
in between.
the third
Mhm.
week, yeah, that's
Third
fine.
week? Okay.
I may or may not be available, I may be in Fairbanks.
Okay.
On the
in-
18th?
In trial that week, just that week.
Uh-huh. Well, then why don't we put it on the 11th? Are you gonna be in trial prep on the
No,
11th?
I'll be available on the 11th. I mean, I'm leaving, I'll be here on the 11th.
That's almost 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
It's, well,
The 18th is
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, it's
Two,
about-
3, that's 3 weeks, okay.
Okay,
Let's do the
let's do the
11th.
11th. 11th works better. for
And
me.
what time?
11:30 to 1:30? Does that work?
Mhm.
That works
That
well
works
for
great
me.
for me.
Yeah.
Will that be the schedule going forward, the second Thursday of every month?
Yeah.
Okay, I did, Bill, if I could 1 minute circle back, is the question was, administrative person and wife are invited by ConocoPhillips for $150 tickets to go to a celebration of former governors or recognition. doesn't fall within the safe harbor, so it comes to us, me or us. And so, under the current code, it anticipates that we're gonna analyze it, and this isn't for an opinion, I just have to get an answer back. Analyze it for conflicts of interest, appearance of impropriety. It doesn't seem to me to have appearance of impropriety, conflict of interest, not if there's not an active, ConocoPhillips doesn't have something active before us. We did just purchase their oil field, however, but
How do
that's
you
a done
know?
deal.
You know, how do we know what's
Yeah, I
active
know,
before us?
right.
I mean, that's the thing, this board is like, what?
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah,
know
there
all
might
the
be,
business.
you know, be a huge task to figure out, I feel like big companies would be hard to track down, I don't know what he has or has a person.
Right.
That's a hard one.
No,
Well, maybe unless you did a blanket sort of statement, there are, well, even that pending matters, there's probably, one of the, top executive team, not the mayor.
Okay, I'm just wondering if that person's individual job description involves anything where they're making a discretionary decision about something that ConocoPhillips has a financial interest in.
Well, and I guess I'm assuming that anybody in the top group has input into
Any
those type of
decisions.
decisions. In
Yeah.
the top 8, we should call them the super 7.
Could we go back and say, we have no issue with it as long as, you know, you can in good faith say that there's nothing before you right now, that is, in which, you know, you have a role in making a decision about some significant financial interest of ConocoPhillips, something like that? I mean, I would trust them to disclose if there's something in front of them, and they would probably know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or could be charged with doing some internal investigation into whatever departments they oversee as to whether or not there's something pending that could.
See, that's
look
just
bad
too
for them.
much,
That's
though.
too much.
Mhm.
That's just
Yeah.
so much. I mean, I think they would be aware of that to begin with.
Yeah, in
Mhm.
theory.
But it's
they
sort of
have that
interesting here, we
awareness.
just did purchase a huge portion of their oil field, a third of it. But that's already done.
Yeah, I'd say until we go back and, I'd say
Mhm.
unless we, you know, I mean, we're not controlled by precedent, but I'd say until we go back and revisit the mayor's ball thing, if we would really wanna undo that decision, I'm certainly happy to go back and revisit it. That just looks like to me like that's the last opinion that we issued on this kind of issue, is that, you know, can you receive tickets to a charitable event from a private party that even occasionally has business before the city? And the answer we said then was no. And that's what I would go with until we have the time to kind of go back and revisit that decision and come up with some other guidelines. I worry about a little bit like coming up with ad hoc,
Yeah.
sort of,
Mhm.
you know, a quick ad hoc answer in this particular case.
Mhm.
No, I agree, and because we've addressed it previously, I haven't heard that opinion, it seems like if it's something we have addressed previously in greater depth,
I
then
don't
we
know,
should
was that?
diverge too strongly.
A long time ago.
Yeah,
That was before my tenure,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Because I
maybe.
mean,
Yeah, I
this
don't
is
know
ConocoPhillips,
anything.
this
No
isn't-
idea.
Yeah,
This
that's right,
isn't
it's not the
like-
Diabetes Association.
Yeah, the
that-
Diabetes
it's the
Association
Boys and
or
Girls
like
Club, right?
Run for
It's-
Women. Yeah, it's like.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, I
corporation
need to go
that
back
we
and
know
revisit that,
has
'cause I don't know
significant
that.
business interests
It always
by,
comes up,
you know,
so.
Yeah.
in front of our administration.
Okay.
Where is that?
Yeah, well, I need to
should we-
review it.
Should we review it before a broad discussion of this issue?
I'll
Yeah.
bring it back in.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it might be up on the web.
It's on the web.
It's on the web, but I mean, if you wanna have it at the meeting, we can.
Is it on the web?
Yeah, it's on the web, but still, it's easier for us to probably get it to you.
Yeah, and I have no problem going back and revisiting that, but I think that's the last sort of like extended analysis we gave to this, and I worry a little bit sort of in an ad hoc way, sort of like departing that now, quickly trying to carve out exceptions to it. I'd
Well, it
rather
seems like
sort of-
another, I think we're hitting on a couple things that maybe merit a little further consideration before the full rewrite, you know,
Mhm.
policy
No, and these are
questions.
really, the ones we discussed today come up again and again and
Mhm.
again.
Yeah, these are
And
the
so it
things
is,
that do we want.
oddly enough, and then, of course, pre-elections, we have all the political stuff. So there's like
Mhm.
these 3 areas that are just repetitive.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. Any other member participation?
Thank
Audience?
you all for
Yeah.
welcoming
course.
David to
David?
the meeting. I realize
Yeah,
he was
no.
fairly disruptive, and I'm
No, it's all right.
Our
thankful
honor.
for
No,
being able
absolutely.
Does he
to
have
bring
any-
him with me this month. He will not attend next month.
Does he have any other participation from the audience?
He's pretty much
He's
done. I
done.
think.
He looks like he's out. He's just like, I've
He
said
was
my
tired out
piece.
by that last piece.
All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right.